Metro Vancouver is a hot button issue. Environmentalists and people against the plan say it opens people up to health problems associated with coal dust. Well, today the port announced the Fraser Surrey Docks coal handling facility must conduct an environmental impact assessment. And Daryl Desjardins is with the Port of Metro Vancouver. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Desjardins. Having the Surrey Fraser Docks in charge of the assessment is a tiny bit like putting the fox in charge of the henhouse, is it not?
Well, in the case of all environmental impact assessments that are done in Canada, is the proponent actually retains independent experts to do the assessment work, and then those assessments are reviewed by independent experts working for the port or for the other agencies that are involved with the review.
But somehow, no matter how much clarity there is, people always tend to doubt the findings, do they not?
They do, and that's why the port has made the decision to move towards an environmental impact assessment, because it will be fact-based, it will be transparent and open for anybody to review and actually make their own conclusions based on the facts of the project, based on the mitigation that's proposed and the effects that are being addressed.
So when you suggest that that will be open to the public, are you going to post this document online, or how are you going to share it with the people?
Once the environmental impact assessment is completed, based on consultation with other agencies, including the Fraser Health Authority, as well as agencies such as the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the environmental impact assessment will be posted for public comment.
And are you going to be having more public consultation? I know that's also one of the concerns from environmentalists, is that, and people opposed, is that they simply don't get a chance to have their voices heard.
The public comment period on the environmental impact assessment is part of the public consultation process. And one aspect of the environmental impact assessment will actually address all of the public consultation, and meetings have been held with communities, local community groups and First Nations will be identified in that document.
How worried are you about coal dust? Would you and your family live near an area where coal dust is prominent?
Well, I grew up in the Kootenays, the East Kootenays, and the largest producer of coal in BC. So I grew up in coal mining country, so I've not had any health effects.
So you're not concerned about this at all, then?
No, it's with the proper mitigation. In fact, three important elements that we also announced today is that we've requested Fraser Surrey Docks address fugitive coal dust, and this is the dust that blows off of either the piles or on the rail cars, to be addressed. And this is more from a nuisance factor. So we've asked them to address coal dust on the trains coming up from the U.S. border into Surrey, the coal pile that has been proposed on a temporary basis to look at the logistics supply chain to eliminate that coal pile. And the third element is to address fugitive dust from the barges that would be transiting through the Fraser River out into Georgia Strait.
Now, I know they already spray some of that coal to dampen the dust. Is that the answer in your opinion?
Well, in fact, one of the best practices that have been used in BC for a number of years, dating back to the early 1980s, is rather than using water, is using a topping agent that actually creates a crust that binds the coal into a strict surface. There's also binding agents that can be mixed with coal that actually reduces the dust as well. So the original proposal from Fraser Surrey Docks was proposing to use water. We're asking them to actually increase that level of mitigation to remove any fugitive dust from the operations.
Right. It's funny, that name fugitive dust, already a negative connotation.
It is.
In my opinion. You're fighting an uphill battle there by calling it fugitive dust. It's got to be one of those things, though, that impacts a company's bottom line, because if you now have to invest in a product that creates a crust, you're taking away some of your product, you're paying for this. I'm thinking that they're not going to be pleased about that.
Well, and I think this is part of the corporate social responsibility that Fraser Surrey Docks has actually undertaken, as well as the Port of Vancouver, is that we want to be good neighbors, and we want to make sure that port operations and port activities don't have impacts on the community, either from a health effects perspective, an ecological perspective, or just a nuisance factor.
Is there any chance you might bring in some regulation about using some of the newer technology to contain the coal product, hinged cars, retractable rail car covers?
In Canada and North America, coal is shipped in open coal cars. No one has proposed, and no rail operations in North America are using covered rail cars.
So you just don't see that as a feasible idea here?
One element of the rail cars is it actually adds to the weight of the rail car and actually adds to the shipping costs. So with topping agents, and we have good evidence that it does work if it's properly applied and resprayed halfway from the mine site down to port, it is very effective. We get over 90% containment.
All right. How long have you given them to conduct this environmental assessment?
We haven't set a timeline because it depends on the number of studies that they've already completed to date and a gap in that information and what additional information they need to pull together. For the public comment period, and there is no requirement to have a public comment period, but we would be following the federal and provincial guidelines, which would be 30 to 45 days. All
right, Darrell Desjardins, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
We want to have a look at the other side of this argument. Eoin Madden is with the Wilderness Committee. And Eoin, you were at that news conference today, or at least you tried to be at that news conference today. What happened?
Yeah, I didn't get to last long there. Unfortunately, I was told it was a media event. I was approached by people who I've never met before and knew my first name. Maybe it's because I've been on this show a few too many times. Informed that it was a media event and asked to leave. It was the most cordial eviction I've ever been through.
Now, obviously, they're concerned about you and about you being there. They're not big fans of yours. What about today's announcement don't you like?
Well, you know, even with the literature I got today, there was a media briefing on who to go and talk to about the environmental impacts of coal. And the person named there was a lobbyist. His name is Alan Fryer. He's from the Coal Alliance. So it just shows you the approach that the port is taking. And I'd ask any of the media that was there today, there are a lot of people you could talk to about the impacts of coal, the BC Lung Association, a lot of our health bodies here in BC who asked to be involved in this process back in December. We heard nothing since. So December 2012, the requests went in, letters were written, please let us in. There's some very, very dangerous aspects to this. And they were refused entry. So finally, we're getting somewhere, and we're happy that the port has actually notified us that this is happening.
Are there protocols for environmental assessments elsewhere that you think we aren't using that we should be?
Well, you just look south. In Washington State, they have an enormous coal port proposed there. The scoping proposal, so basically, what are the parameters? What do we look at? Do we look at climate change? We look at coal dust all along the tracks. That was a public process. They opened it up to the public to say, well, what do you want us to look at? They being the regulator. And 124,000 people got to make submissions on that. They did look at climate impacts, and they did look at coal dust along the tracks. Compare that with the Port Metro Vancouver situation, where we have a port that says, yes, I'm the regulator, but no, I'm not going to talk to you about what we're going to look at here. We're going to ask you to ask the proponent, Fraser Surrey Docks. An easy way to explain that would be, if you compare it to the Northern Gateway situation, it would be like going to Enbridge and asking Enbridge, what are we allowed to talk to you about in relation to this project?
So you're suggesting that really they're hiding kind of behind our ignorance or our naivete?
Well, Port Metro Vancouver operates quite similarly to someone who runs a shopping mall. They have an interest in keeping business running. Their board is made up, 8 out of 11 of those people are business people who are put in there. They have connections with the Coal Alliance through the Coal Association of Canada. So they're not independent as such. A true independent hearing would be something like a panel made up of somebody like Health Canada or Transport Canada, something like that, where we could all make submissions to them and they could make an unbiased decision. The coal port and Port Metro Vancouver are very associated in this process.
You heard Darrell Desjardins say that he has no problem with coal and coal dust. He would live near the facility. Would you?
I would rely on the BC Lung Association. You know, physicians who have written into the port and stated their position, given their professional opinion, which is that this is dangerous to people's health. We need a proper hearing. To leave that up to the port, as in Fraser Surrey Docks, who are proposing to build this, to run that process is a little bit old-fashioned.
You did hear Mr. Desjardins, though. He said the review is independent. They have to go out and not find their own people. You know, they have to find independent contractors to conduct this assessment. You still don't believe?
Well, if there was a 3-part panel, for instance, made up of completely independent folks who could look at the health issues, look at the climate impacts, you've got some chance of an independent result. Contractors very often find the results that they're asked to find. it's not independent from our perspective whatsoever.
Okay. We obviously can't put a price on human life, and you wouldn't like to see anybody get sick or die from coal dust or the negative aspects. You have to know, though, that in this province, resource industries are huge. Mining is second to forestry. It provides $5 billion a year in economic activity, 26,000 jobs. How do we deny that kind of economy in the province?
Well, many people misinterpret the situation. We got involved in this because of the expansion. Okay, so no one's talking about the 26,000 current jobs in coal just yet. But we need time to have a bigger conversation, and climate change is a game changer. There are a lot of people involved in this who are against this idea because of climate change. Studies have been done on shifting over to having an economy that actually has embraced climate change. You get a return of 5 to 8 times more jobs when you invest in renewable energies, for instance, over oil and gas. So there's a lot of jobs to be created if we take climate change seriously and we make the shift. But we need to put a pause on this expansion and give us time to respect those 26,000 jobs and find alternatives.
All right. Eoin, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
It's Eoin. I knew I'd do it.
That's all right.
Eoin, thanks for being here.
Okay.